Rain lashed against the tall windows of Ethan Caldwell's Seattle mansion, each drop a drumbeat in the symphony of the storm that raged across the Puget Sound. Lightning splintered the sky, casting fleeting shadows over the manicured lawns and iron gates that encircled his estate. At 45, Ethan, a white American billionaire whose tech empire dominated the Pacific Northwest, stood alone in his oak-paneled study with a glass of bourbon cradled in his hand. His sharp blue eyes, framed by faint lines of stress, traced the tempest outside, but his thoughts were elsewhere, locked in a past he'd spent 15 years trying to outrun. Ethan had been a ghost in his own life for a decade and a half. Once a charismatic innovator who mingled with Seattle's elite, he shunned the world, running Caldwell Technologies from behind encrypted screens and steel doors. His mansion, a modernist fortress of glass and stone, perched on a wooded hill, was both sanctuary and prison. The betrayal that drove him here, Lillian Harper's affair with his brother Noah, and her ruthless seizure of half his company, had left scars deeper than the wealth he'd since amassed. Friends had faded, invitations had stopped, and Ethan preferred it that way. Solitude was safe. "Mr. Caldwell," a gentle voice came from the doorway. Clara, his housekeeper of 12 years, stood with her graying hair neatly pinned, her expression a mix of concern and resignation. The grocery delivery service called. The storm delays them, but they should arrive within the hour. Ethan didn't turn, his gaze fixed on the rain. "Tell them to leave it at the gate, as usual." "In this weather?" Clara's tone held a hint of reproach. "They'll be soaked through." "They're paid to deliver," he said flatly, the words clipped and final. Once warm with charm, his voice carried an edge honed by years of isolation. Clara sighed, a soft sound swallowed by the storm's roar, and retreated. She remembered the old Ethan, the one who laughed easily, who hosted summer barbecues on the lawn, before Lillian's betrayal turned him to stone. He rarely left the mansion, save for board meetings via video link. Clara had watched him build walls higher than the estate's gates, and though she longed to see him break free, she knew better than to push. 20 minutes later, the security panel on Ethan's desk buzzed, its screen flickering to life. A small delivery van idled at the gate, its headlights cutting through the downpour. Ethan frowned, irritated by the interruption to his evening ritual of bourbon and financial reports. With a press of a button, he opened the gate remotely, expecting the driver to drop the groceries and leave. But the van didn't move. Instead, the screen showed a figure, a woman, stepping out, clutching bags and battling the wind as she approached the mansion's entrance. A rapid knock echoed through the foyer, sharp and insistent. Ethan froze. No one knocked on his door. Deliveries were left outside. Business associates were vetted and met at secure offices downtown. The knocking persisted, each rap a challenge to his carefully controlled world. Setting his glass down, he strode to the front door, his jaw tight with annoyance. He swung it open, ready to dismiss the intruder, but the sight before him stopped him cold. A woman stood on the threshold, rain streaming from her dark curls, her delivery uniform plastered to her frame. She clutched 2 grocery bags, shielding them with a soaked jacket. At 30, Aisha Thompson, a black American woman with warm brown eyes and a defiant tilt to her chin, looked neither intimidated nor apologetic. Water dripped onto the marble floor as she met Ethan's glare head-on. "Mr. Caldwell?" Her voice was steady, despite the chill. "I'm Aisha from Quick Fresh Deliveries. Got your groceries, but my van's dead in your driveway. Can I use your phone to call for help?" Ethan stared, his mind grappling with her presence. It had been years since a stranger, let alone a woman, had stood so close, speaking to him without deference or fear. Her directness, Her refusal to shrink under his scrutiny unsettled him. "Leave the groceries," he said, his tone as cold as the rain. "I'll have my driver take you back to town." Aisha's eyebrows shot up, and she shook her head, sending droplets flying. "That's it? No. Come in from the storm. No. Let me help with those bags? I heard you were cold, but this is next level." The bluntness caught Ethan off guard. No one spoke to him like that. Not employees, board members, or even Clara in her boldest moments. People groveled or kept their distance, wary of his wealth and reputation. But Aisha stood there, soaked and unafraid, her eyes challenging him to be human. "Fine," he said stiffly, stepping aside. "Come in. Don't drip on the rug." Aisha stepped into the grand foyer, her sneakers squeaking on the marble. She glanced at the soaring chandelier and sleek staircase, her expression mixed with amusement and awe. "Nice place," she said, setting the bags down carefully. "Where should these go?" Before Ethan could respond, Clara appeared, her face softening at the sight of Aisha. "Oh, you poor thing, you're drenched. Let me take those." She bustled forward, lifting the bags. "Come to the kitchen. Get warm. I'll make tea." Ethan watched, rooted to the spot, as Clara led Aisha away, chatting as if they were old friends. Aisha's easy laugh echoed down the hall, a sound foreign in the mansion's sterile silence. He should have returned to his study, bourbon and solitude, but something, curiosity perhaps, drew him to follow. As he lingered in the kitchen doorway, Aisha glanced back, her gaze meeting his. In that moment, Ethan felt a faint but undeniable spark, like a crack in the walls he'd built so carefully. He didn't know it yet, but with her broken van and fearless honesty, Aisha Thompson had just begun to unravel the life he'd sworn never to share again. The kitchen of Ethan Caldwell's Seattle mansion glowed warmly, a stark contrast to the storm raging beyond its walls. Pendant lights cast a soft amber hue over the granite countertops, and the scent of brewing chamomile tea mingled with the faint tang of rain-soaked air. Aisha Thompson sat at the island, her damp delivery uniform clinging to her frame, a towel draped over her shoulders. Clara, the housekeeper, bustled at the stove, her movements practiced yet gentle, as if tending to a guest was a rare treat in this sterile fortress. Ethan lingered in the doorway, his arms crossed, watching the scene with irritation and unease. Aisha's presence, her voice, her ease, felt like an intrusion, yet he couldn't tear himself away. "Thanks for the tea," Aisha said, wrapping her hands around the steaming mug Clara slid across the counter. Her still damp curls framed her face in tight spirals, and her smile held no trace of the deference Ethan was accustomed to from delivery drivers or business associates. "This place is something else." "Do you ever get lost in here?" Clara chuckled, stirring sugar into her cup. "I've been here 12 years and still occasionally take wrong turns. But it's home, in its way." Ethan's jaw tightened. Home. The word grated, conjuring images of a life he'd buried long ago, before Lillian Harper's betrayal turned his mansion into a vault for solitude. He cleared his throat, stepping into the light. "You said your van broke down. What happened?" Aisha glanced at him, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "Just my luck. It made a weird clunk, then died right in your driveway. Tried restarting it, but nothing. My boss is sending a tow, but with this storm, it'll be a while." She sipped her tea, unfazed. "I'm used to things going sideways." "You roll with it." Her nonchalance unsettled Ethan. Most people, faced with a stalled vehicle and a billionaire's scrutiny, would apologize or grovel. Aisha did neither. She sat there, dripping on his pristine floor, talking as if they were equals. "You're not worried about being stuck here?" he asked, His tone clipped. She shrugged, setting the mug down. Stuck's a strong word. I'm dry, I've got tea, and Clara's great company. It could be worse. Her gaze flicked to him. A playful challenge unless you plan to kick me out in the rain. Clara stifled a laugh, busying herself with the kettle. Ethan's lips twitched, an involuntary response he quickly suppressed. He said I don't habitually throw people out, though his voice lacked warmth. But I don't entertain uninvited guests either. Aisha raised an eyebrow. Entertain? I need a phone, not a dinner party. However, you're living up to the rumors. Reclusive tech guy, colder than a Seattle winter. The bluntness hit like a jab. Ethan was used to whispers, gossip about his withdrawal from society, his refusal to attend galas or tech summits. But no one dared say it to his face. Not since Lillian and Noah shredded his trust 15 years ago. Rumors, he said, his voice low, are rarely accurate. Maybe, Aisha replied, undeterred. But when you open your door like I'm selling scam insurance, it's hard to argue with the vibe. She leaned forward, her tone softening, but still direct. I get it. Big house, big walls, literal and otherwise. But I'm just here to do my job and get home. Ethan stared at her, caught between annoyance and fascination. Her words cut through his defenses, not with malice, but with a clarity he hadn't encountered in years. Clara, sensing the tension, intervened. Aisha, you can use the landline in the hall to call your boss. I'll show you. As Aisha stood, Ethan surprised himself by speaking. Use mine. He pulled his phone from his pocket. A sleek, custom model he rarely handed to anyone, and held it out. It's faster. Aisha paused, her eyes narrowing as if weighing his motive. Then she took the phone, her fingers brushing his briefly, sending an unexpected jolt through him. Thanks, she said, her smile genuine, almost disarming. I promise, no international calls or sneaky app downloads. The quip drew a faint, rusty chuckle from Ethan, a sound so foreign he barely recognized it. Clara's eyes widened, but she said nothing, guiding Aisha to a corner of the kitchen to make her call. Ethan retreated to the island, gripping the counter as if to anchor himself. What was he doing? This woman was a stranger, a disruption. Yet her presence, her refusal to cower or flatter, stirred something he'd long suppressed. Curiosity. Aisha's voice carried softly as she spoke to her boss. Yeah, Van's toast. Stuck at the Caldwell place. Can you send someone? Okay, an hour? Fine. She hung up, handing the phone back to Ethan. They're swamped with the storm. I'm here for a bit. Hope that's not a problem. It's fine, Ethan said, though his mind raced. An hour with her in his space felt like a test he hadn't prepared for. He should send her to wait in the foyer and keep his distance. Instead, he heard himself say, You don't have to stay in the kitchen. There's a sitting room. Warmer. Aisha tilted her head, studying him. You sure? I don't want to mess up your fortress of solitude thing. It's one night, he said, more to himself than to her. I'll survive. Now wiping down the counter, Clara shot Ethan a knowing look, but stayed silent. Aisha grabbed her tea and followed him to the sitting room, a cozy space with leather armchairs and a gas fireplace that Clara had lit earlier. As they settled, Aisha in a chair, Ethan standing by the mantel, she spoke again. So, what's the deal with this place? It's like a museum, but nobody's visiting. Ethan's fingers tightened around his phone. It's private. That's how I like it. Private's one thing, Aisha said, sipping her tea. This feels like you're hiding from something. Or someone. The observation landed like a stone in still water, rippling through Ethan's carefully guarded calm. He wanted to snap, to shut her down, but her eyes held no judgment, only a quiet challenge. You don't know me, he said, his voice low, but not harsh. True, she admitted, but I know what it's like to carry something heavy. You don't get that look in your eyes without a story. She leaned back, her tone lightening. Don't worry, I'm not digging. You don't always have to be a fortress. Ethan didn't respond. His mind caught on her words. A story. His was one of betrayal, of Lillian's calculated charm and Noah's complicity, of a life rebuilt in isolation. But Aisha's directness, her refusal to tiptoe around his wealth or reputation, felt like a crack in the armor he'd worn for years. As the storm howled outside, Ethan realized he didn't want her to leave. And that realization, small as it was, terrified him more than the thunder shaking the windows. The morning after the storm, Seattle woke to a tentative calm. The sky bruised but clear, puddles mirroring the city's jagged skyline. Aisha Thompson stepped out of her apartment in the Central District, a vibrant neighborhood where jazz clubs and murals stood alongside new condos creeping in like ivy. Her one-bedroom unit, tucked above a laundromat, was modest. Peeling paint, a finicky radiator, but it was hers, earned through grit and 3 jobs. She adjusted her delivery uniform. The Quick Fresh logo faded from too many washes, and checked her phone. Her van was in the shop, but her boss had assigned her a replacement for the day's routes. The name on her schedule stopped her cold. Caldwell, E. The reclusive billionaire had requested her specifically. Aisha's mind flicked to the previous night. Ethan Caldwell's cold dismissal softening into something else, a flicker of curiosity in his guarded eyes. She'd met plenty of wealthy clients, their politeness often laced with condescension. But Ethan was different. His walls were higher, his solitude almost tangible. Yet her bluntness had cracked something open. Shaking off the thought, she grabbed her keys and headed out, the morning air sharp with the scent of wet pavement and coffee from a nearby cart. Her apartment building buzzed with life. Neighbors calling greetings, kids racing to the bus stop. Once a hub for Black families like hers, the Central District was changing, its heart squeezed by gentrification. Aisha's grandmother, who'd raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 10, had loved this place. It's our roots, she'd say, her hands kneading dough for Sunday cornbread. Her grandmother's battle with diabetes and the lack of affordable clinics had fueled Aisha's dream to become a nurse and open a community health center here. That dream kept her going through diner shifts, bookstore hours, and late-night deliveries, even when exhaustion clawed at her. At the Quick Fresh depot, Aisha loaded groceries into the loaner van, her thoughts drifting. If she could save enough, nursing school was a year away, maybe 2. Every paycheck was a step closer, but the weight of it, bills, rent, the van's repair, sometimes felt like wading through mud. Still, she'd learned early to keep moving. Trouble doesn't always last, her grandmother used to sing, and Aisha clung to that. The drive to Ethan's mansion wound through wooded hills, the city fading into a sprawl of evergreens. The estate loomed ahead, its glass facade glinting like a blade. Aisha parked, grabbed the grocery bags, and rang the bell, expecting Clara, the warm housekeeper, to answer. Instead, the door swung open, and Ethan stood, his crisp shirt and guarded expression at odds with the casual morning light. "You're back," he said, his voice low, almost surprised, as if he hadn't been the one to request her. "Looks like it," Aisha replied, handing him the bags. Her fingers brushed his, a fleeting contact that sent a spark through her. Figured you'd want someone else after I called you out last night. Ethan's lips twitched, not quite a smile. I don't mind directness. It's rare. He took the bags, his gaze lingering on her. Most people tiptoe around me. While gesturing at the mansion, Aisha said they might be scared of the fortress vibe, or the whole "don't talk to the billionaire" thing. He raised an eyebrow. And you're not? Nope, she grinned, leaning against the doorframe. I've dealt with worse than a grumpy tech guy. Try serving coffee to hungover tech bros at 6 a.m. This time, a genuine smile flickered across Ethan's face, brief but unguarded. It transformed him, softening the sharp lines of his jaw, hinting at the man he might have been before whatever locked him away. Aisha felt a tug of curiosity, quickly tamped down. She was here to deliver, not decode a recluse. Clara's in the kitchen, Ethan said, stepping aside. She'll want to feed you again. Aisha shook her head. I've got a whole route. Can't stay. She turned to leave, but Ethan's voice stopped her. Wait. He hesitated, his fingers tightening on the bags. Would you have dinner with me? Tonight, maybe? The words came out rushed, as if he'd surprised himself. Aisha froze, her hand on the van's door. Dinner? With Ethan Caldwell? The man who barely left his mansion? She turned, studying him. His posture was stiff, his eyes wary, but there was something raw there. A risk he was taking. You're serious? She asked. Yes. He cleared his throat. Somewhere in the city. Your choice. She tilted her head, weighing the idea. Part of her wanted to say no. Her life was whole enough without complicating it with a billionaire's baggage. But another part, the part that noticed the crack in his armor last night, was intrigued. All right, she said finally. There's a taco place on Pike Street. Nothing fancy. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. I won't, Ethan said, and his relief was palpable momentarily. As Aisha drove away, the mansion shrinking in her rear view, she couldn't shake the feeling she'd just stepped into something bigger than a dinner date. Ethan Caldwell wasn't just a client. He was a puzzle, one she wasn't sure she should try to solve. Back at the mansion, Ethan stood in the foyer, the grocery bags forgotten in his hands. Clara appeared, her eyes twinkling with unspoken questions. Dinner, sir? She asked, her tone teasing. Ethan didn't answer, but a faint smile lingered as he carried the bags to the kitchen. For the first time in 15 years, he felt a pull toward the world beyond his gates, and it was all because of a delivery woman who refused to tiptoe around his walls. The neon sign of Tacos El Sol flickered on Pike Street, its warm glow spilling onto the bustling sidewalk where Seattle's evening crowd wove through food carts and buskers. Aisha Thompson stood outside, her denim jacket slung over a simple green dress, her curls loose and catching the streetlight. She'd chosen this spot for its familiarity, greasy, delicious tacos, and a vibe that felt like home, not the sterile opulence of Ethan Caldwell's world. Her stomach fluttered, not from hunger, but from the absurdity of it all. A date with a billionaire who hadn't left his mansion in years? She must be out of her mind. Inside, Ethan sat at a corner table, his tailored blazer starkly out of place among the diner's vinyl booths and chipped formica. He'd arrived early, driven by a restless need to control something in this unfamiliar territory. Lillian Harper's calculated charm had closed his eyes to her motives the last time he'd been on a date. Now, his fingers tapped the table, nerves warring with the curiosity Aisha had sparked. When she walked in, her confident stride drawing eyes, Ethan stood, his breath catching. She wasn't polished like the women he'd once known. She was real, which scared him more than he'd admit. Hey, Aisha said, sliding into the booth. You look like you're about to negotiate a merger, not eat tacos. Ethan's lips twitched. I don't get out much. This is new. Understatement of the year, she teased, grabbing a menu. Relax. It's just food. Best carnitas in the city. You do eat regular food, not just caviar and gold flakes? He chuckled, a low, rusty sound. I manage. Tacos sound good. The waitress, a friend of Aisha's from her diner shifts, took their order with a knowing grin. As she left, Aisha leaned forward, her eyes scanning Ethan. So, why here? You could have picked some fancy place with a wine list longer than my grocery route. You said somewhere normal, Ethan replied, his voice quieter. I wanted to try your world. Aisha raised an eyebrow, impressed but skeptical. My world's not exactly glamorous. 3 jobs, late nights, scraping by. Can you handle it? I'm here, he said, meeting her gaze. The sincerity in his eyes, unguarded momentarily, made her pause. This wasn't the cold recluse from their first meeting. This was a man reaching for something he'd forgotten how to grasp. Their tacos arrived, steaming and fragrant, and the conversation flowed more easily than Aisha expected. She talked about her nursing school plans, her voice lighting up as she described her dream of a community clinic in the Central District. She said people need care they can trust, picking at a chip. My grandma went without it for too long. I want to change that. Ethan listened, his fork paused. That's ambitious. Most people would stop at getting the degree. Aisha said that most people don't grow up where I did. Not bitter, but matter of fact. You see what's broken, you fix it, or you try. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. I used to think like that, building something that mattered. Before, he trailed off, his jaw tightening. Before you locked yourself away? Aisha finished, her tone gentle but direct. You gonna tell me what happened, or do I have to guess? Ethan's fingers curled around his glass. It's not a story for a first date. Fair, she said, leaning back. But you're good at dodging, you know that? All I know about you is tech empire, big house, zero social life. What's Ethan Caldwell actually about? The question hit harder than she intended. Ethan looked down, the clink of plates and chatter around them fading. I'm figuring that out, he admitted. You're part of it. You don't treat me like a bank account or a headline. That's rare. Aisha softened, sensing the weight behind his words. That's because you're just a guy eating tacos, far as I'm concerned. A grumpy one, but still. He laughed, the sound warmer now, and the tension eased. They swapped stories. Hers about a disastrous diner shift involving a spilled milkshake, his about a coding marathon that launched his first app. Aisha noticed how his shoulders relaxed, and how his guarded answers grew longer. But when she asked about his family, he deflected, steering back to her. You're slippery, she said, pointing a chip at him and talking without saying anything tangible. I'm on to you. Caught me, he said, his smile faint but genuine. I'll do better next time. Next time? Aisha arched a brow, bold, assuming I'll say yes to another date. You will, he said, a spark of confidence in his eyes. You're curious too. She couldn't deny it. Ethan was a puzzle, wounded, guarded, but with a warmth she hadn't expected. As they finished, the diner's noise felt like a cocoon, shielding them from the world. Ethan paid, waving off Aisha's offer to split, and they stepped into the cool night air. He offered, I'll drive you home, nodding to his sleek sedan parked nearby. Nah, I'm good, Aisha said. The bus stop is 2 blocks away. Your mansion's the other way. I insist, he said, and the earnestness in his voice made her relent. The drive to her Central District apartment was quiet, the city lights blurring past. At her building, a modest brick structure with graffiti-tagged stairs, Aisha paused, turning to him. "I had fun," she said. "Didn't expect to, but I did." "Same," Ethan admitted, his hands tight on the wheel. Then, hesitantly, "Can we do this again? Somewhere less taco-y, if you want." Aisha grinned. "Nope. Next time, it's my call again. Somewhere, even more normal. See if you can keep up." "Deal," he said, and as she climbed out, she surprised him with a quick kiss on his cheek, her lips soft and fleeting. "Night, Ethan." He watched her disappear into the building, his fingers brushing the spot she'd kissed. The gesture, simple and uncalculated, lingered like a spark. Ethan felt the pull of possibility for the first time in 15 years, and though it scared him, he didn't want it to fade. Morning light filtered through the tall windows of Ethan Caldwell's Seattle mansion, casting long shadows across his study. He sat at his desk, a sleek monitor displaying Caldwell Technologies' latest quarterly reports, but his mind was elsewhere. The memory of Aisha Thompson's kiss on his cheek, fleeting yet warm, lingered like a melody he couldn't shake. Their taco dinner the previous night had been a revelation. Her laughter, her unapologetic candor pulling him further from the solitude he'd clung to for 15 years. Yet, a familiar unease gnawed at him, even as he savored the flicker of hope. Opening up, even slightly, felt like stepping onto thin ice. A soft knock broke his thoughts. Clara, the housekeeper, stood in the doorway, her usually warm expression tight with unease. "Mr. Caldwell, there's a visitor. She's insistent. Says her name is Lillian Harper." The name hit Ethan like a cold wave. Lillian. His ex-fiancée was the architect of the betrayal that had isolated him. He hadn't seen her since she'd walked away with half his company, her smile as sharp as the legal papers she'd served him. "Tell her to leave," he said, his voice low and hard. "I tried, sir," Clara replied, wringing her hands. "She says it's urgent. Business, she claims." Ethan's jaw clenched. Business. Lillian's version of business was always a game he'd lost spectacularly years ago. He considered refusing, but curiosity, or perhaps a need to face the past, won. "Send her in." Clara nodded and retreated. Moments later, Lillian Harper swept into the study, her designer heels clicking on the hardwood. Her blonde hair was swept into an elegant chignon, her tailored suit exuding confidence. She looked every bit the polished socialite she'd been when they were engaged, but her eyes held a glint of calculation that Ethan now recognized. "Ethan," she purred, her smile practiced. "It's been too long." "Not long enough," he said, standing behind his desk, keeping the polished wood between them. "What do you want, Lillian?" She perched on the edge of a leather chair, unfazed by his coldness. "I'm back in Seattle, launching a tech startup with my husband, James. We're looking for investors, and who better than the great Ethan Caldwell?" Her tone was light, but her gaze was predatory, scanning the room as if measuring his success against hers. Ethan's fingers tightened on the desk. "You think I'd invest in you? After what you did?" Lillian's smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. "That was 15 years ago, Ethan. Water under the bridge. You've done well. Better than I expected, honestly. I thought you'd crumble after." She paused, her eyes flicking to his face. "Well, you know. After you slept with my brother the night before our wedding?" Ethan's voice was steady, but the words carried a raw edge. "After you sued me for half my company, claiming you built it? You walked away with millions, Lillian. What more do you want?" She leaned forward, her voice softening, a tactic he remembered too well. "I want a partnership. Your name carries weight. My startup could leverage that. And maybe, she tilted her head, her smile turning coy. Perhaps we could revisit what we had. Ethan laughed, a bitter sound. What we had was a lie. You wanted my money, my status. You got both. We're done. Lillian's eyes narrowed, her charm slipping. I heard you've been out dining with a delivery girl. Aisha, is it? Moving on so soon? The mention of Aisha's name in Lillian's mouth felt violated. Ethan's voice dropped, dangerous. Leave her out of this, and get out. Lillian stood, smoothing her skirt. Fine, but Seattle's small, Ethan. We'll see each other again. Think about my offer. She paused at the door, her parting shot laced with venom. Not everyone's as pure as they seem. As the door closed, Ethan sank into his chair, his hands trembling with suppressed rage. Lillian's return wasn't just a coincidence, but a calculated move. She'd always thrived on control, on bending people to her will. 15 years ago, she'd orchestrated an affair with Noah to provoke Ethan, expecting him to fight for her. When he didn't, she'd taken his company instead, her ambition fueled by resentment over his refusal to play her game. Now, she was back, sniffing out his newfound vulnerability. Aisha. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his spiral. Aisha's name lit up the screen, and he answered, his voice still tight. Hello? Hey, it's me, Aisha said, her tone bright but cautious. You sound off. Bad time? No, he lied, taking a deep breath. Work. Uh-huh, she said, skeptical. Well, I was thinking about that next time you mentioned. There's a food festival in the park this Saturday. Local vendors, music, no chandeliers. You in? Ethan hesitated. A public event, crowded and exposed, was everything he'd avoided for years. But Aisha's voice, warm and inviting, pulled at him. Yeah, he said, surprising himself. I'm in. Noon? Perfect, she said, and he could hear her smile. Meet me at the park entrance. Don't chicken out. I won't, he promised, a faint smile tugging at his lips. As he hung up, the weight of Lillian's visit lingered, but Aisha's call had steadied him. Lillian was a ghost, a reminder of the pain he'd buried. Aisha was honest, a spark of something new. Yet, as he stared at the Seattle skyline, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that his past was closing in, threatening to unravel the fragile hope Aisha had ignited. The Seattle park buzzed with life on Saturday, its green expanse transformed into a vibrant food festival. Colorful booths lined the paths, offering sizzling skewers, spicy dumplings, and frothy craft beers, while a jazz quartet's notes floated over the crowd. Aisha Thompson stood at the entrance, her sundress bright against the overcast sky, scanning for Ethan Caldwell. She'd half expected him to bail. Crowds weren't his thing, judging by the fortress he called home, but his promise to show up echoed in her mind. Her fingers fidgeted with a beaded bracelet, a gift from her grandmother, grounding her as she braced for whatever this day might bring. Ethan arrived, his casual sweater and jeans contrasting with his usual tailored suits. The park's noise, laughter, chatter, the clatter of plates, hit him like a wave, urging him to retreat to the safety of his mansion. 15 years of solitude had made crowds feel like chaos, each face a potential threat. But Aisha's morning text, "Don't chicken out, taco guy," had steeled his resolve. Spotting her waving, her smile bright and unforced, he felt the knot in his chest loosen. She was worth this risk. "You came," Aisha said, her voice teasing but warm. "I was ready to bet you'd hide behind your gates." "I said I would," Ethan replied, echoing her words from their first date. He managed a half smile, though his eyes darted to the throng behind her. This is a lot. You'll survive, she said, grabbing his hand with easy confidence. Come on, the empanadas are calling. Her warm and steady touch anchored him as they wove through the festival. Aisha led him to a booth run by a friend from her community garden, a wiry man named Javier who handed them steaming empanadas with a grin. Aisha, you brought a newbie? Is he any good at weeding? Not yet, she laughed, nudging Ethan, but I'm working on him. Surprised by the casual welcome, Ethan took a bite, and the flaky crust and spicy filling were a revelation. This is good, he said, earning a nod from Javier. He felt invisible for the first time in years. Not the billionaire recluse, just a guy eating with friends. Aisha introduced him to others, gardeners, neighbors, a nurse from her diner shifts, who greeted him without pretense. Their warmth, rooted in the Central District's tight-knit spirit, chipped away at his unease. As they moved to a booth serving jerk chicken, Aisha's laughter rang out, recounting a garden mishap involving runaway zucchini. Ethan found himself smiling, her joy infectious. See? She said, catching his expression. Normal people aren't so bad, are they? Not bad at all, he admitted, his voice softer. The moment felt fragile, a glimpse of a life he'd forgotten, until a familiar voice shattered it. Ethan Caldwell, out in the wild? Lillian Harper stood before them, her designer sunglasses perched atop her head, a sly smile curling her lips. She wore a tailored blazer, out of place among the festival's casual vibe, and carried a clipboard, posing as a donor for a bookstore booth nearby. What a surprise. Aisha's smile faded, her hand tightening on Ethan's. And you are? Lillian Harper, she said, her tone dripping with false warmth. Ethan and I go way back. Don't we, darling? Ethan's jaw tightened, the old wound of her betrayal, her affair with his brother Noah, her theft of half his company, flaring. Lillian's just leaving, he said coldly. Lillian ignored him, turning to Aisha. You must be the delivery girl. Aisha, right? Charming, slumming it with the locals. Her smile was sharp, her words a jab at Aisha's world. Aisha's eyes narrowed, but her voice stayed even. It's Aisha, yeah, and I'm not slumming. This is my community. You're the one who looks lost. Lillian's laugh was brittle. Oh, I'm right at home. Ethan always had a thing for simpler types. Enjoy it while it lasts. She walked away, her heels clicking, leaving a heavy silence. Aisha turned to Ethan, her expression a mix of hurt and confusion. Who is she to you? And don't dodge this time. Ethan glanced around, the festival's cheer now suffocating. Not here, he said, his voice low. Let's find somewhere quiet. They walked to a small cafe a few blocks away, its dim lighting and worn tables a refuge. Seated with coffee, Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of his past pressing down. Lillian was my fiancée. 15 years ago, he began, his voice steady but raw. The night before our wedding, I found her with my brother Noah. They'd been together for months. After I called it off, she sued me, claiming she helped build my company. She won half of it and disappeared with Noah. Aisha's eyes softened, but she didn't interrupt. That's why you hid away, she said when he finished. Not a question, but a statement. She broke your trust. Yeah, Ethan said, staring into his coffee. I wanted to avoid that kind of pain again. Then you showed up. Aisha reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. I'm not her, Ethan. I don't play games. But you've got to let me in. At least a little. He looked at her, her honesty cutting through his defenses. I'm trying, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. But Lillian showing up. It's a reminder of why I stopped trying. She wants something, Aisha said, her gaze sharp. People like that always do. Ethan nodded, Lillian's earlier words echoing. Her startup pitch, her taunt about Aisha. She wasn't here for nostalgia. She wanted control, a way to reclaim the spotlight Ethan's success had denied her. As they left the cafe, Aisha's hand in his felt like a lifeline. Lillian's presence was a storm cloud, but Aisha's warmth was sunlight, and Ethan wasn't ready to let it go. The Seattle dawn broke gray and heavy, mirroring the mood in the Central District bookstore, where Aisha Thompson stacked paperbacks. Her leg ached, propped in a cast from an accident 2 days prior. A car had clipped her crossing the street after her shift, leaving her with a broken fibula and bruised ribs. She'd shrugged off the pain, insisting on working, but the whispers from coworkers stung worse. A tabloid article's headline screaming, "Billionaire's gold digger." The truth about Aisha Thompson had spread like wildfire. It painted her as a schemer who targeted Ethan Caldwell, claiming her delivery to his mansion and even her accident were calculated ploys. Anonymous sources hinted at a history of chasing wealthy men, and a quote from a close friend bore Lillian Harper's venomous touch. Aisha shelved a novel, ignoring the sidelong glances from a colleague, Maya. They'd been friendly, sharing coffee breaks, but now Maya's smile was tight, her questions probing. "So, you and that billionaire, huh?" She'd set a big step up from deliveries, her tone half teasing, half sharp. Aisha had brushed it off. "Just a date, Maya, not a heist." But the doubt lingered, seeping into her workplace like damp rot. The diner was worse. Customers whispered, and her manager had cut her shifts, citing distractions. Her dream of nursing school felt shakier, the article's lies threatening her hard-earned stability. At noon, Aisha's phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "At the hospital. Can I see you?" She'd been discharged that morning but hadn't told him, needing space to process. The accident, a random hit by an elderly driver, wasn't Lillian's doing, but its timing, days after her taunts at the food festival, felt too convenient. Aisha hobbled to the bookstore's break room, her crutches clicking, and called him back. "I'm at work," she said, her voice steady despite her fatigue. "You don't need to check on me." Ethan replied that you were hit by a car, his voice tight and worried. "I'm coming there." 20 minutes later, he arrived, his presence in the cramped bookstore drawing stares. His sweater and jeans couldn't hide the aura of wealth, and Aisha felt the weight of every eye. She said, "Let's talk outside," leading him to a bench across the street, away from prying ears. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of coffee from a nearby cart. Ethan sat beside her, his hands clasped tightly. "I saw the article. It's Lillian. I'm so sorry, Aisha. My lawyer's demanding a retraction." Aisha shook her head, her curls bouncing. "I don't care about retractions. It's out there. People at the diner, here, they look at me like I'm some con artist. I've worked too hard for this." Ethan's jaw clenched, guilt flashing in his eyes. "This is my fault. I brought you into my mess." "No," Aisha said firmly, her gaze locking onto his. "I chose to be here with you. But I need to know you believe me, not that garbage in the paper." "Of course I believe you," he said instantly, his hand reaching for hers. "I know who you are, Aisha. You're real. You've never asked me for anything." She nodded, relief softening her tension. "Good. Because that's all that matters to me. The rest of the world can think what they want." Her voice held a steel forged by years of pushing through loss. Her parents, her grandmother's illness, the grind of 3 jobs. "But it's not just talk. My boss at the diner has already cut my hours. This could cost me." Ethan's expression darkened. "I'll fix this. Whatever you need." "I don't need your money," she cut in, her tone sharp but not unkind. I need you to trust that I can handle this. I've been through worse. He nodded, chastened. What happened with the accident? The police report said it was an elderly driver, but with Lillian, it was an accident, Aisha confirmed. Bad timing, that's all. But, she hesitated, then met his eyes. Lillian came to the bookstore before it happened. Offered me 50 grand to walk away from you. Said you'd never trust anyone again, and I'd just get hurt. Ethan's hands balled into fists. She threatened you? More like warned me, Aisha said, her voice steady. I told her to keep her money and stay out of my life. She didn't like that. Ethan stood, pacing the sidewalk, his anger palpable. She's playing games again. She did this 15 years ago. Manipulated, lied, tried to control me. I won't let her hurt you. Aisha reached for his hand, pulling him back to the bench. I'm not worried about me. I've dealt with people like her, petty, thinking money buys everything. I'm concerned about you. This is digging up old pain. He sat, her touch grounding him. It is, he admitted. But you're worth it. I haven't felt alive like this in years. Aisha's smile was small but warm. You're getting sappy, Caldwell. Careful, I might start liking it. She paused, added, my apartment's got stairs, no elevator. With this cast, it's a nightmare. I need a place to crash while I heal. Come to the mansion, Ethan said without hesitation. There's a guest suite, no stairs. Clara would love the company. So would I. Aisha studied him, weighing the leap. Moving in, even temporarily, meant diving deeper into his world. But his earnestness, how he looked at her, not as a delivery girl or a headline, but as Aisha, tipped the scale. All right, she said, but no fancy nonsense. I'm bringing my coffee. Ethan's smile broke through, rare and unguarded. Deal. As they parted, Aisha returned to her shift, and Ethan went to his car. She felt a mix of defiance and hope. The article's sting lingered, but so did Ethan's belief in her. Lillian's shadow loomed, but Aisha had faced bigger storms. She'd keep fighting, for her dreams, for herself, and maybe, just maybe, for whatever this was with Ethan. The guest suite in Ethan Caldwell's Seattle mansion was a haven of soft linens and warm light, its floor-to-ceiling windows framing the misty evergreens beyond. Aisha Thompson settled into the plush bed, her leg cast propped on pillows, a stack of nursing textbooks beside her. It had been 3 days since she'd agreed to recover here, her Central District apartment stairs too daunting with her injury. The mansion, once a cold fortress in her mind, felt different now, less like a museum, more like a home. Clara, the housekeeper, had outdone herself, stocking the suite with herbal teas and a quilt from her collection, her warmth a quiet balm. Yet Ethan's presence, tentative, attentive, shifted the air most. Aisha glanced up as Ethan knocked softly, leaning in the doorway with a tray of coffee and pastries. Clara's orders, he said, setting it on the bedside table. She says you need fuel for studying. Clara's a saint, Aisha said, managing a smile despite the ache in her ribs. You're not bad either, playing waiter. Ethan's lips curved, a rare ease in his posture. Please don't get used to it. I'm better with code than croissants. He sat in an armchair nearby, his eyes lingering on her. How's the leg? Sore, but I'll live, she said, flipping a textbook closed. The real pain's the bookstore. My manager is reconsidering my shifts because of that article. Says customers are gossiping. Ethan's jaw tightened. The defamatory tabloid piece, Lillian Harper's handiwork, still a raw wound. That's not fair. You didn't ask for any of this. Life's not fair, Aisha said, her voice steady but tinged with frustration. I've dealt with worse. When my grandma got sick, clinics turned her away. No insurance, long waits. I'm not letting some trashy article stop me." Her eyes met his, fierce with resolve. "But it stings, you know? People I thought knew me, judging." Ethan leaned forward, his hands clasped. "I'll make this right, Aisha. My lawyer's pushing for a retraction, and I can talk to your manager." "No," she interrupted, her tone firm. "I handle my fights. Always have." She softened, seeing his concern. "But thanks. It means something, you being here." He nodded, a flicker of guilt in his eyes. Aisha's strength, her refusal to lean on his wealth, both awed and unsettled him. Once his shield against the world, the mansion felt alive with her in it. Her laughter echoing during chess games, her textbooks scattered across the coffee table. Last night, they'd watched a documentary on urban gardens, Aisha's passion for her community clinics spilling out as she talked about her grandmother's resilience. Each moment chipped away at the walls he'd built since Lillian's betrayal. Their routine settled into a quiet rhythm. Mornings with Clara's breakfasts, afternoons of Aisha studying while Ethan worked remotely, evenings spent talking about her childhood in the Central District, his early days coding in a cramped dorm. Aisha's stories were vivid, filled with block parties and her grandmother's cornbread. Ethan's were guarded, but he shared snippets of launching Caldwell technologies, avoiding the pain of Lillian and Noah. Aisha didn't push, but her presence coaxed him open, like sunlight through a crack. That afternoon, as Aisha napped, Ethan's phone buzzed with a call from Marcus, his assistant. "Sir, it's urgent," Marcus said, his voice tense. "Lillian Harper and her husband James made an offer on Harbor Tech, your waterfront property. It's well above market value." Ethan's grip tightened, his mind racing. Harbor Tech, a prime real estate holding adjacent to his mansion, was his buffer. Its undeveloped land ensured his privacy. "How do they have the capital?" he asked. "Unclear," Marcus replied, "but the board's meeting is on Monday. They're pressuring to consider it. And there's chatter online. The article's still circulating, sir. It's hurting Miss Thompson's reputation at her job." Ethan paced the study, anger simmering. Lillian's motives were more apparent now. She wasn't just after his money or influence. She wanted to invade his sanctuary, to punish him for thriving without her. Her startup pitch, the article, now Harbor Tech, all were moves to destabilize him, to reclaim the control she'd lost when he rebuilt his empire post-betrayal. Aisha's face flashed in his mind. Her strength, her refusal to break. He wouldn't let Lillian touch her. He found Aisha awake, sketching clinic floor plans in a notebook. "Everything okay?" she asked, catching his tension. He said, "Lillian's trying to buy a property I own, sitting beside her. Harbor Tech is next to the mansion. It's not just business. She wants to get under my skin." Aisha's eyes narrowed. "She's obsessed. That bribe she offered me, the article, now this? She's not over you, Ethan, or what you've built." He nodded, her insight cutting through his fog. "I won't let her win. Not this time." "Good," Aisha said, her hand brushing his. "Because I'm not going anywhere. We'll figure this out." Her touch steadied him. The mansion no longer a fortress, but a home, alive with her presence. As evening fell, they played chess, Aisha's laughter filling the room when she checkmated him. Ethan watched her, marveling at how she'd transformed his world. Lillian's schemes loomed, but with Aisha here, he felt something new. Courage to face the past, not hide from it. The boardroom of Caldwell Technologies gleamed with polished mahogany and floor-to-ceiling views of Seattle's skyline, but the air was thick with tension. Ethan Caldwell stood at the head of the table, his posture rigid as he faced the board members, debating Lillian Harper's offer to buy Harbor Tech, his prized waterfront property. The overmarket bid, backed by Lillian and her husband James, was a clear power play, and Ethan's refusal to sell had sparked murmurs of fiduciary duty. He owned 51% of the company, giving him final say, but the pressure was mounting. Then the door opened, and Ethan's breath caught. Noah Caldwell, his estranged brother, stepped in, standing beside Lillian and James. "Hello, Ethan," Noah said, his voice steady, but tinged with unease. He wore a suit, but the lines around his eyes betrayed years of regret. "It's been a while." Ethan's fists clenched, the betrayal from 15 years ago. Noah's affair with Lillian, the night before Ethan's wedding, surging like a fresh wound. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, his voice cold enough to silence the room. James, a wiry man with shrewd eyes, answered, "Noah's our partner in this venture. His expertise strengthens our offer." Expertise. Ethan's laugh was bitter. "You mean betrayal?" He turned to the board. "This deal is off. I won't sell to them." Meeting adjourned. The board members filed out, casting uneasy glances, but Noah lingered. "We need to talk, Ethan. Alone." "We have nothing to say," Ethan snapped, but Noah's expression, earnest, almost pleading, gave him pause. "5 minutes. My office." Ethan sat behind his desk in the sleek office, a barrier against the past. Noah stood, hands in his pockets, the silence heavy with unspoken history. "You look good," Noah said finally. "Success suits you." "Cut the small talk," Ethan said, his voice like steel. "Why are you here?" "With her." Noah sighed, running a hand through his hair, a familiar gesture stirring a pang in Ethan. "It's not what you think. I'm not Lillian's ally. I came to warn you." "Warn me?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. "After what you did, you expect me to trust you?" "I don't," Noah admitted, his voice low. "I know I destroyed us." "Lillian manipulated me, Ethan. She told me you were cheating on her, that you didn't love her. I was drunk, stupid, and believed her. By the time I saw the truth, you'd cut me out." Ethan's chest tightened, the old pain raw. "You slept with my fiancée. You let her take half my company. And now you're back, playing her game again?" "No," Noah said, stepping closer. "I heard you were coming out of hiding and seeing someone. Aisha. Lillian's obsessed with you, Ethan. She's not over losing you. In the article, Harbor Tea, she wants to hurt and ruin what you're building with Aisha." Ethan stood, pacing to the window. The skyline blurred as he processed Noah's words. Lillian's actions, the bribe to Aisha, the defamatory article, the property bid, fit a pattern of vindictive control. But Noah's sincerity, the regret in his eyes, clashed with Ethan's instinct to shut him out. "Why should I believe you?" he asked. "You betrayed me as much as she did." Noah said that his voice broke because he regretted it every day. "Lillian used me, then left me for James when the money ran dry. I lost you, my brother, my best friend. I'm here to make it right, even if you never forgive me." Ethan stared at him, torn between anger and a flicker of the bond they'd once shared. Summers, coding together, late-night talks about their dreams. "Stay away from me," he said finally, "and tell Lillian to back off." Noah nodded, defeated. "Just be careful. She's not done." As he left, Ethan felt a crack in the wall he'd built against his brother. Small, but undeniable. That evening, Ethan returned to the mansion, where Aisha sketched clinic plans in the guest suite. Her crutches leaned against the wall, a reminder of her strength despite the accident. She said, You look like you've seen a ghost, setting her pencil down. My brother, Ethan, said, sitting beside her. Noah showed up at the board meeting with Lillian. He says he's not with her and is warning me about her plans. Aisha's eyes widened. The brother who... She trailed off, knowing the story. Do you believe him? I don't know, Ethan admitted, running a hand through his hair. He's a better liar than I ever was. But what he said about Lillian makes sense. She's after control, always has been. Aisha took his hand, her touch steadying. If he's telling the truth, she's trouble. If he's not, you're ready for it. Either way, you're not alone. Ethan looked at her, her resolve anchoring him. You make this easier, he said. I don't know how, but you do. She smiled, squeezing his hand. Good. Now help me with this floor plan. I'm stuck on the waiting room layout. The mansion's quiet warmth enveloped them as they bent over her sketches. Noah's return had shaken Ethan, but Aisha's presence reminded him what was real. Forgiveness was a long road, but he felt ready to take the first step with her beside him. The Seattle waterfront sparkled under a rare afternoon sun, its piers bustling with tourists and street vendors. Ethan Caldwell navigated the crowded streets, his sedan weaving toward the sleek office building housing Lillian Harper's tech startup. His hands gripped the wheel, his resolve hardened by Noah's warning and Aisha Thompson's unwavering strength. Lillian's schemes, the defamatory article branding Aisha a gold digger, the bribe to drive her away, the audacious bid for Harbor Tech, had pushed him too far. He'd hidden from her betrayal for 15 years, letting it define him. Today, he'd end it. Inside, the startup's office buzzed with hip minimalism, glass walls, exposed brick, young coders tapping at laptops. Lillian stood near a whiteboard, directing an assistant with a practiced smile. When she saw Ethan, her expression flickered, surprise, then smug satisfaction. Ethan, she said, dismissing the assistant. Come to reconsider my offer? We need to talk. We do, he said, his voice cold as steel. In private. She led him to her office, a corner suite with views of Elliott Bay. Perched on her desk, she crossed her arms, her tailored blazer crisp. Harbor Tech's a smart buy, she began. Our offer's generous. The board's itching to accept. This isn't about Harbor Tech. Ethan cut in and stepped closer. It's about you. The article, the threats to Aisha, your games. They stop now. Lillian's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. Games. I'm protecting you, Ethan. That woman's after your money. You're blind, just like you were with me. Don't, he snapped, his voice low and dangerous. Aisha's never asked me for a dime. She works 3 jobs and fights for her dreams. You offered her 50 grand to leave me, and she told you to shove it. That's who she is. You? You took half my company because I wouldn't play your puppet. Lillian's composure cracked, her lips tightening. You think you've won because you rebuilt your empire? I made you stronger, Ethan. You should thank me. Her voice softened, a calculated shift. We were good together. You could have fought for me, but you ran. Ethan's laugh was bitter. Fought for you? You slept with my brother, Lillian. You wanted me to chase you, to prove you could control me. When I didn't, you took everything you could and left. Now you're back because I'm happy, and you can't stand it. Her eyes flashed, her mask slipping entirely. Happy? With a delivery girl? She's playing you, Ethan, smarter than I was. She knows you're weak for a sob story. Ethan stepped closer, his voice steady. Here's what's going to happen. You and James print a full retraction for that article, admitting it was fabricated. You withdraw your Harbor Tech offer, and you stay away from Aisha and me. If you don't, I'll go public. Every detail of your affair with Noah, the lawsuit, your lies. I kept quiet to move on, but I'll burn your reputation to the ground if you push me. Lillian's face paled, her hands gripping the desk. You wouldn't. Your precious privacy. Try me, he said, his gaze unflinching. You taught me to fight for what matters. Aisha matters. Silence hung between them for a moment, heavy with the weight of their past. Lillian's shoulders slumped, her defiance crumbling. Fine, she said, her voice cold. You'll regret this. I already regret you, Ethan said, turning to leave. At the door, he paused. Stay out of our lives, Lillian. I'm not the man you broke anymore. He drove back to the mansion, the confrontation's adrenaline fading into clarity. For years, Lillian's betrayal had held him captive, but facing her had freed something inside him. Aisha had shown him what was worth fighting for, not wealth or power, but connection, trust, her. At the mansion, Aisha sat in the garden, her leg cast propped on a cushioned bench, the late sun catching her curls. She was sketching clinic layouts, but her expression was tight. Ethan sat beside her, his heart clenching at her quiet strength. You okay? He asked. She sighed, setting her notebook down. The bookstore called. They're reviewing my position. The article's still out there, Ethan. Customers complain, saying I'm a distraction. I might lose that job. Guilt surged through him. I confronted Lillian. She'll retract the article. I'm sorry, Aisha, but this is because of me. No, she said, her hand finding his. It's because of her, and I'm not giving up. I've clawed my way through worse, losing my folks, watching my grandma fade. I'll find another job if I have to. Her eyes met his, fierce but warm. But you're standing up to her? That means more than you know. Ethan squeezed her hand, marveling at her resilience. You're worth everything, Aisha. I told her that. I meant it. She smiled, a spark of mischief breaking through. Careful, Caldwell. Keep talking like that, and I might think you're falling for me. Maybe I am, he said, the words slipping out, raw and authentic. Her smile widened, and momentarily, the garden felt like their own world, untouched by Lillian's schemes. As the sun dipped below the trees, Ethan knew the fight wasn't over. Lillian might retreat, but her spite lingered. Yet with Aisha beside him, her strength mirroring his own, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Once his prison, the mansion was their sanctuary, and he wouldn't let anyone take that away. The garden of Ethan Caldwell's Seattle mansion bloomed with summer life, its flower beds vibrant with dahlias and lavender, a far cry from the sterile fortress it had been 6 months ago. String lights crisscrossed above, casting a warm glow over tables laden with food, cornbread, jerk chicken, empanadas, reflecting the Central District's flavors. Aisha Thompson, her leg now free of its cast, moved through the crowd, her laughter mingling with the jazz drifting from a portable speaker. The housewarming party, her idea, buzzed with friends from her community garden, co-workers from the diner, and even a few of Ethan's staff, a testament to the home they'd built together. Ethan stood near a cedar bench, a glass of iced tea in hand, watching Aisha with a quiet awe. Her presence had transformed his world, and tonight it felt complete. Aisha had started nursing school, and her dream of a community clinic is now within reach, partly funded by Ethan's quiet support, but driven by her vision. The defamatory article, retracted after Ethan's confrontation with Lillian Harper, still lingered in whispers, but Aisha had weathered it. The bookstore had kept her on after public apologies, and the diner restored her shifts, her resilience silencing doubters. Tonight, she wore a bright sundress, her curls catching the light as she hugged a friend, her joy infectious. Ethan marveled at how she'd turned his mansion into a home, its halls now filled with her textbooks, laughter, and life. Clara, the housekeeper, approached with a tray of lemonade, her smile wide. "Quite a change, sir," she said, nodding at the crowd. "This place hasn't seen this many people since, well, ever." Ethan chuckled, a sound that came more easily now. "Change is good, Clara. Aisha's idea, not mine." "She's good for you," Clara said softly, her eyes warm for all of us. Across the garden, Ethan spotted Noah, his brother, talking with Marcus, his assistant. Noah's presence was a surprise. Their reconciliation, a slow, cautious dance, since his warning about Lillian. After the Harbor Tech deal collapsed, Lillian and James withdrawing their offer under Ethan's threat, they'd announced a move to Silicon Valley, a face-saving exit after the retracted article exposed their lies. Noah had stayed, reaching out with hesitant texts, offering apologies Ethan wasn't ready to accept fully. Tonight, he'd invited Noah, a tentative step toward healing. Their eyes met, and Noah raised a glass, a silent acknowledgement. Ethan nodded back, the gesture small, but heavy with possibility. Aisha joined him, slipping her arm through his. "You're quiet," she said, her voice teasing. "Overwhelmed by all the normal people?" "Not overwhelmed," he said, pulling her close. "Just grateful. This," he gestured at the garden, the laughter, the life. "It's because of you." She grinned, nudging him. "It took you long enough to figure out some deliveries worth signing for." Her gaze softened. "But you're not so bad yourself, Caldwell. You showed up." He looked at her, the weight of the past, Lillian's betrayal, Noah's complicity, fading against her warmth. "I want this, Aisha," he said, his voice low but certain. "Not just tonight. A future. You, me, this home. Will you stay? Not as a guest, but for good." Twilight draped the garden of Ethan Caldwell's Seattle mansion, the air soft with the scent of lavender and damp earth. Fireflies blinked in the dusk, their tiny lights weaving through the flower beds where Aisha Thompson had planted herbs during her recovery. The hum of the housewarming party from the previous week lingered in Ethan's memory. Laughter, music, the clink of glasses. But tonight, the garden was theirs alone. He stood beside Aisha, her hand warm in his, her curls glowing faintly under the string lights still strung above. The mansion, once a fortress of solitude, now pulsed with the life they'd built together, a testament to the journey that had begun with a broken-down van and a fearless knock. Aisha leaned against him, her shoulder brushing his as they watched the fireflies dance. "She said she never thought I'd end up here." Her voice soft, but laced with her usual spark. "From delivering groceries to this." "You're full of surprises, Caldwell." Ethan smiled, his thumb tracing circles on her hand. "You're the surprise, Aisha. I was done with the world until you showed up, soaking wet and calling me out." She laughed, the sound bright in the quiet. "That van breaking down was my best delivery yet. Got me a home, a partner, and a shot at my clinic." Her eyes met his, warm and steady. "Got me you." Ethan's chest tightened, not with the fear that once ruled him, but with a fullness he hadn't known in 15 years. Lillian Harper's betrayal, her affair with Noah, the theft of half his company, had driven him to hide, convinced isolation was safety. He'd lived behind the mansion's gates for years, his tech empire thriving while his heart withered. Aisha had changed that. Her honesty, her refusal to see him as just a billionaire, had cracked his defenses, showing him that safety wasn't in walls, but in being truly seen. The past months had tested them, Lillian's schemes, the defamatory article, the Harbor Tech bid, the bribe to Aisha, had stirred old wounds, but Aisha's resilience had held them steady. The article's fallout lingered. Aisha had lost some diner shifts, but the bookstore kept her on, and her nursing school progress fueled her dream of a central district clinic. Ethan's confrontation with Lillian forced her to retreat, and the retracted article made her move to Silicon Valley with James, a quiet victory. Noah's tentative steps toward reconciliation remained a work in progress, and their recent coffee meetups were cautious but promising. Ethan hadn't fully forgiven, but Aisha's encouragement, "He's your brother, not your enemy," had opened a door he'd thought sealed. "You're quiet," Aisha said, tilting her head. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ethan looked at her, the fireflies reflecting in her eyes. "I was thinking about that rainy night you showed up. I hid for so long, Aisha, thinking it kept me safe. You taught me differently. Safety's not locking yourself away. It's finding someone who sees all of you, the mess and the good, and stays." Her smile softened, and she squeezed his hand. "You're getting poetic on me. But you're right. I see you, Ethan, the guy who codes all night, who sucks at chess, who fought for me. And I'm staying." He leaned down, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that felt like coming home. It was gentle at first, then deeper, a promise sealed in the garden they'd made theirs. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers, his voice low. "I love you, Aisha. I didn't think I could again, but I do." "I love you too," she whispered, her breath warm against his cheek. "Took you long enough to catch up." He laughed, the sound free and unguarded, starkly contrasting to the man who'd once flinched at a knock. They turned to the garden, hand in hand, the mansion's windows glowing behind them. Clara's silhouette moved in the kitchen, preparing tea, a quiet reminder of the family they'd built, not just with each other, but with her, Marcus, and the Central District community that had embraced Ethan. The party had woven their worlds together, gardeners, diner regulars, even Noah, proving life was richer beyond his gates. As the stars emerged, Ethan felt no trace of the fear that had defined him. Aisha had shown him that love wasn't a risk to hide from, but a strength to embrace. The mansion, once his retreat, was now the heart of their home, its garden a symbol of growth, rooted in trust. "What's next for us?" he asked, his voice light but curious. Aisha grinned, her eyes sparkling. "Keep up with nursing school, open that clinic, and maybe teach yourself to garden without killing the basil. You? Keep loving you," he said, "and learn to make cornbread like your grandma's." "Good luck with that," she teased, pulling him toward the house. "Come on, let's see if Clara's got any left." As they walked inside, the fireflies fading behind them, Ethan knew he wasn't just existing anymore. With Aisha by his side, he was living, fully, fearlessly, for the first time in years, ready for every tomorrow they'd face together.